On the surface, it was paradise, a $13 million superyacht drifting through the turquoise waters of the Bahamas. But on July 3rd, 2025, paradise broke, below deck. In the suffocating heat of the engine room, 20-year-old Paige Bell was found dead. The young South African stewardess had been living her dream at sea until that dream turned into horror. Was it a tragic accident or something far more sinister? This is a chilling, true story of Paige Bell and the darkness beneath paradise. Welcome to Criminal Mind Tales, where real stories meet deep investigation. If you love true crime and real-life mysteries, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a case. The afternoon sun burned over Harbour Island, turning the ocean into a sheet of moving glass. The yacht far from it gleamed like a floating palace, anchored quietly at the dock. To anyone watching from shore, it was a scene of luxury and calm, the kind of beauty that hides its own silence. Inside that silence, the crew moved through their routines. The scent of cleaning chemicals hung in the narrow corridors. The galley clattered faintly with breakfast dishes. But one cabin stayed closed, one name unspoken in the morning chatter. Paige Bell, the youngest member of the crew, hadn't reported for duty. At first, her absence was brushed off. Maybe she'd overslept. Maybe she'd taken her coffee up to the sun deck. But as the hours stretched, unease crept in. Paige was never late. Her fellow stewardesses tried her door again and again, knocking until their knuckles hurt. Her phone rang unanswered. Her cabin was empty. By early afternoon, the captain made the call. The Royal Bahamas police were alerted. On a vessel like far from it, there was nowhere to vanish. The officers boarded at 1 p.m., methodical, quiet, searching from the top deck down. The yacht was immaculate. 6 cabins, polished with floors, chrome fixtures gleaming. Nothing looked out of place. But when investigators reached the lower level, the temperature rose. The air in the engine room was heavy, mechanical hum pressing against the walls. And there, between the turbines and oil drums, they found her. Paige lay motionless on the floor. She wasn't breathing. Her uniform torn, her body still, the noise of the yacht's engines filling the space where her heartbeat used to be. A doctor was called aboard. At 1:45 p.m., Paige Bell was pronounced dead. Word spread through the vessel like electricity. Crew members wept in the corridors. The captain locked down the decks. What had been a dream job for a young woman from Durban had turned into something unthinkable. Then came the second discovery. Just feet away from Paige's body lay another crew member, a man in his late 30s, slumped against a metal wall, blood on his hands. He was alive, barely. His name was Brigido Muñoz, the yacht's engineer. At first, police feared a double tragedy, an accident or gas leak, but a closer look told a different story. Muñoz's wounds looked deliberate. Deep cuts to the arms, not the kind an accident would cause. Near his side, investigators found a sharp object stained dark red. By evening, Bahamian authorities had sealed the yacht as a crime scene. The luxury vessel that once hosted celebrities and sun-seekers was now cordoned off with yellow tape. Officers photographed every inch of the engine room. The crew were questioned one by one, trembling as they spoke. Outside, the marina buzzed with rumors. "A girl's been found dead," someone whispered. "A stewardess." Others gathered by the dock fences, staring at the floating mansion under police watch. Paradise, they said, had turned poisonous. Thousands of miles away in South Africa, Paige's family were preparing something very different. Her 21st birthday was only days away. Her sister Chelsea had ordered the red velvet cake Paige loved since childhood. Her parents were planning a small dinner, ready to welcome her home after months at sea. Then the phone rang. The call came just after sunset. The voice on the other end was steady, official. There had been an incident in the Bahamas. A pause. Then the words that make time stop. Found deceased. Nothing could have prepared them. Just days earlier, Paige had sent videos from the yacht, laughing, waving, talking about how excited she was to see them again. And now she was gone. The next morning, the Bell family boarded a plane bound for Nassau, the longest flight of their lives. They weren't traveling to meet their daughter. They were traveling to bring her home. As news broke across international headlines, the world met Paige through photographs, a smiling young woman in a white polo uniform, sunlight on her face. Articles called her bright, ambitious, beloved by crew. Her colleagues aboard her previous vessel, Sweet Emotion, said she was the heart of the team, always laughing, always helping others before herself. In online forums for yacht workers, tributes poured in. She was living her dream. One post read, "She deserved so much better." By July 5th, investigators confirmed that Paige's death was being treated as a homicide. Brigido Muñoz was in custody at a Nassau clinic, recovering under police guard. The headlines grew louder. Stewardess found dead on luxury yacht. Engineer arrested after body discovered below deck. Each story carried the same photograph, Paige's bright smile frozen in time. But beneath the media glare was something quieter, a deep, collective grief spreading through the international yachting community. Her friends described sleepless nights, questions that wouldn't end. How could this happen? Why wasn't she safe? For many, Paige's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a reckoning. It exposed the truth behind the polished image of superyacht life. The long hours, the isolation, the power imbalance when you live and work miles from shore. And as her parents landed in Bahamas to face the unbearable task of seeing her one last time, the world began to understand that this wasn't only a story about one young woman's death. It was a story about safety, silence, and accountability in an industry that had long hidden its darker corners behind white hulls and clear horizons. Paige Bell's name would not fade quietly into another forgotten headline. Her story was already beginning to change things. Because what happened aboard Far From wasn't just a crime. It was a wake-up call, one that echoed across oceans, forcing a question no one wanted to ask. How many others have been lost beneath the surface of paradise? Before her name became a headline, before her photograph appeared beside words like tragedy and murder investigation, Paige Bell was simply a girl who loved the ocean. Born on July 14, 2004, in Johannesburg, South Africa, she grew up far from the sea, but carried it in her imagination from the very start. Her family used to say she was happiest when she was near water, a swimming pool, a river, even a rainstorm. Anything that shimmered and moved pulled her in. When Paige was still a child, the Bell family relocated to Durban, a coastal city where the Indian Ocean meets wide, golden beaches. It was there that her fascination with the sea grew into something larger than wonder. She'd sit on the sand for hours, tracing the tides with her fingers, watching the ships drift toward the horizon. She once told her sister Chelsea that she wanted to see where the water ended. She was gentle but determined, a balance that drew people to her. Teachers described her as bright and curious, a student who listened more than she spoke, but whose laughter could light up a classroom. Her mother said she had a kindness that felt older than her age. Her friends remembered how she collected seashells in jars, labeling each one with the beach and date. "So I'll never forget where I've been," she'd say. By her teens, Paige knew what she wanted: to work at sea. She wasn't chasing fame or wealth. She wanted freedom, travel, and the calm rhythm of ocean life. While others dream of offices and cities, Paige dreamed of ports and harbors. The idea of working on yachts, combining service travel and the sea, seemed perfect. After finishing school, she earned her maritime certifications and began training as a stewardess. Her parents were nervous at first. The thought of their youngest daughter working thousands of miles away, surrounded by strangers. But Paige was persuasive. "You raised me to be brave," she told them, and she meant it. Her first contract came in 2023 aboard the motor yacht Sweet Emotion, a 116-foot vessel that toured the Caribbean and Mediterranean. For Paige, it was everything she'd hoped for: the discipline of daily tasks, the unity of the small crew, the reward of seeing the world unfold across endless blue. Crewmates remembered her as a golden girl, cheerful, organized, quick to help others. She kept her bunk spotless and her uniform pressed, but she never lost the warmth that made her human. When guests left behind flowers or leftover desserts, she'd share them with the kitchen staff. When a crewmate was homesick, she'd sit beside them on deck and listen until the silence turned into laughter again. She loved small things: stargazing from the bow, taking photos of sunrise reflections, collecting postcards from every port. Red velvet cake was a ritual. Every birthday, she'd insist on it, even if it meant baking it herself. "It tastes like home," she once said. By December 2024, Paige had completed her term aboard Sweet Emotion and was already thinking of what came next. She dreamed of advancing to chief stewardess someday, of managing her own team and mentoring new crew. In January 2025, she accepted a new position on Far From It, a larger, high-profile yacht registered in the Cayman Islands and based in the Bahamas. It was a step up, more guests, higher standards, bigger challenges. She was thrilled. The yacht itself was breathtaking. 143 feet long, 6 guest cabins, marble interiors, a jacuzzi on the upper deck, and a charter price that reached over $150,000 a week. Guests were wealthy, discreet, often celebrities escaping the mainland. For the crew, it was both an honor and a test. Long hours, precision work, and the unspoken rule of professionalism above all else. Paige adapted quickly. She impressed her new captain and earned trust within weeks. Fellow crew described her as focused but full of life. She would hum while polishing glassware, laugh when others were tired, and never complained about the pace. In her messages home, she said she was finally where she was meant to be. But behind the glamour of the industry, there were cracks. Working on a yacht was isolation in disguise, a floating microcosm where personal space vanished, hierarchy ruled, and escape wasn't always possible. The ocean was freedom only for those who could leave it. For the crew, it was duty bound by water on all sides. Paige accepted that reality without fear. She told her sister that being at sea made her feel strong. "You have to be tough here," she said during one of their last video calls. "It's not for everyone, but it's worth it." In late June 2025, just weeks before her 21st birthday, Paige was already planning her return home. She wanted to surprise her family in Durban, spend time with her friends, and maybe take a road trip along the coast. "One more week," she texted her mother, "then I'm coming home." It's strange how ordinary those last messages sound, how they hold no clue that her life was running out of time. She talked about packing her things, about what gift she wanted for her birthday, about bringing back shells for her little cousins. There was no warning, no shadow in her words. Her final social media post showed a photograph of the sea taken from a yacht's deck, sunlight glittering across the waves. The caption read, "Still my favorite place on earth." Hours later, she would vanish from that world forever. The days after her death felt unreal to those who knew her. Paige's colleagues from Sweet Emotion were devastated. "She was sunshine," one of them wrote online. "She made every storm easier." Another said, "She was the reason I stayed another season at sea. She made it feel safe." Her family struggled to understand. They had raised her to be cautious, grounded, responsible. She was never reckless, never careless. The thought of her dying on a yacht, a place built on safety and precision, felt like a contradiction that could never be resolved. The Bell family's home in Durban became a place of quiet mourning. Friends dropped off flowers, meals, letters. People who had never met Paige lit candles and shared her photo online. Her community remembered her as the girl who chased her dream and paid for it with her life. But amid the sorrow, something else took shape, resolve. Her parents vowed to bring her body home, no matter the cost, and to demand justice for what happened aboard Far From It. Within days, her former crewmates launched a fundraiser to help with the immense costs of repatriation and legal travel. The target was modest, $16,000, but donations poured in from across the world. Within a week, the fund had surpassed $60,000. Hundreds of people left messages. She deserved so much better. Justice for Paige. Sail home safely, Angel. On July 14th, the day she would turn 21, her family and friends gathered along the Durban shore. They brought red velvet cake, her favorite, and set slices by the water. One by one, they took pictures and shared them online, honoring the young woman who once said she could never live far from the sea. The photos became a symbol. Hundreds of slices of red velvet against waves and sand, from South Africa to Europe to the Caribbean. A global farewell. Paige Bell's story was no longer just about what had been taken from her. It was about what she left behind, the kindness she gave freely, the courage she showed in pursuing her dream, and the movement she inspired in death. For those who followed her case, she became a face of something larger, the reminder that no dream, no matter how beautiful, should ever cost a life. And as investigators in Nassau began piecing together the events of that July morning, one truth became impossible to ignore. Beneath the glamour of the superyacht world, beneath the sparkling surface that so often hides its flaws, something deeply broken was waiting to be seen. July 3rd, 2025. The day began like any other aboard, far from it. A day of order, polish, and practiced smiles. The yacht rocked lazily in the calm waters off Harbour Island, sunlight spilling across its decks. Guests had disembarked days earlier, leaving behind the hush that comes after luxury. For the 8-member crew, it was a maintenance stretch, the kind of day reserved for deep cleaning and quiet tasks before the next charter. At 8 a.m., the galley was alive with the soft clatter of breakfast prep. The stewardesses moved through their routines like choreography. Linens washed, glassware polished, silver laid out in neat rows. But one person was missing from that rhythm. When the second stewardess, a colleague close to Paige, realized she hadn't appeared for duty, she thought little of it at first. Paige was always punctual. She'd even show up early, coffee in hand, ready to brief the others on their daily schedule. By 9 a.m., when her cabin door remained closed, that first flicker of worry began to rise. Maybe she's unwell, someone said. Maybe she's still asleep. By 10:30, worry turned to confusion. Crew members knocked again, louder this time. Still no answer. Her phone, always within reach, rang unanswered. Her uniform was neatly hung in her locker. Her bunk was made. She wouldn't just disappear, one of her superiors later told investigators. She loved her job. She wouldn't have left the yacht without telling someone. At 11:45 a.m., the captain ordered a full search of the vessel. The yacht's design, elegant but enclosed, made every space feel close, the air tight and heavy. They checked the main deck, the cabins, the galley, the storage areas. No sign of Paige. The search was quick, methodical, and increasingly frantic. When crew members peered into the engine room, they hesitated. It was loud, hot, and not a place where a stewardess would ever be. It was a space for engineers, thick with oil and mechanical heat, far removed from the polished decks above. But with nowhere left to check, one of the officers led the way down. The moment they stepped inside, the smell hit first, a sharp mix of fuel, sweat, and something metallic that didn't belong. What they found next would change everything. There, against the cold metal floor, lay Paige Bell. She was unresponsive, her uniform disheveled, her skin pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. The confined space amplified every sound. The hum of the engines, the quick breaths of the officers, the low crackle of radios. They called for medical assistance immediately, but the doctor who arrived minutes later could only confirm what they already feared. Paige was gone. Even as her body was covered, something else caught the officer's attention. A second figure, slumped a few feet away. It was the yacht's engineer, 39-year-old Brigido Muñoz. He was still breathing, though barely. His arms bore deep, deliberate cuts. There was blood on the metal on his uniform, and near his hand lay a sharp implement streaked with red. The officers froze. It was a scene no one expected. 2 crew members, both injured, one dead, one alive, in the one part of the ship no one else had business entering. By 1 p.m., the Royal Bahamas Police had secured the yacht as a potential crime scene. Passports were collected. No one was allowed to leave. The captain, visibly shaken, provided initial statements. Paige had been last seen the night before, cheerful and talking about her plans to go home soon. She'd gone to bed early. Nothing unusual had been reported overnight. Investigators moved quickly. Photographs were taken, samples collected, the engine room cordoned off. The body was removed with care, escorted up through narrow stairs that suddenly felt too small for the weight of what they carried. On the dock, crew members stood silent, watching the stretcher pass. Some cried openly. Others just stared, unable to process that the friend who had laughed with him hours before was now being taken away under a white sheet. At the local clinic, Brigido Muñoz was stabilized under police guard. Officers noted his demeanor, pale, withdrawn, unresponsive. He didn't ask questions. He didn't speak. By late afternoon, far from it was swarming with law enforcement. The yacht, once a symbol of luxury and ease, had become an active investigation zone. The polished decks that once reflected the sun were now shadowed by officers' boots and yellow tape. The news spread fast across Nassau. Crew member found dead on luxury yacht. The headlines read. Within hours, international outlets picked up the story. The contrast was too shocking to ignore. A glamorous vessel, a young stewardess, a sudden death in paradise. But behind the headlines, detectives were faced with grim facts. Paige had suffered visible injuries. Her body bore signs of a struggle. She had fought back. It was clear she had not gone quietly. Though investigators have not released her full autopsy report, the Royal Bahamas Police confirmed that her death was being treated as homicide. That statement, simple and cold, echoed through every newsroom and every conversation among the yachting community. Meanwhile, her family in South Africa received the call no family should ever get. The Royal Bahamas Police reached out through official channels, confirming that Paige had been found deceased aboard far from it. Her mother's first reaction was disbelief. "No," she reportedly said over and over. "That's not possible. She's coming home." In Durban, the news rippled outward like a shockwave. Friends gathered at the Bell family home. Neighbors brought food and flowers. Even those who barely knew Paige felt the loss. "She was one of ours," a local teacher told reporters. "She represented everything our young people dream about, seeing the world, doing something different. Now she's gone." By the evening of July 3rd, the Bahamian government released an official statement confirming the ongoing investigation. The yacht remained docked under police supervision. Officers were collecting evidence and interviewing the remaining crew, none of whom were allowed to leave the country. The next morning, journalists and camera crews gathered along the marina fences, filming the silent, towering yacht. Far from it, with its white hull and mirrored windows, floated like a ghost, its name now cruelly ironic. What exactly happened inside that engine room in the hours before Paige's body was found remains under investigation. But some things are clear. Paige Bell was last seen alive aboard the yacht she loved, and she never left again. In the following days, the suspect, Brigido Muñoz, was charged with murder and remanded in custody. His court appearance was brief. He was not required to enter a plea. The judge denied bail, citing the gravity of the crime and ongoing investigation. His next hearing was set for November 20th, 2025. Until then, he would remain in custody at Fox Hill Prison in Nassau, one of the region's most notorious detention centers. For Paige's family, these developments offered little comfort. "We just want answers," her father said quietly at the airport before departing for the Bahamas. "We want to bring her home." When the Bell family arrived in Nassau, they were met by local authorities and members of the South African consulate. What awaited them was not closure, but heartbreak. They were allowed to view her body under supervision. They held a brief, private ceremony before beginning the process to repatriate her remains. In the days that followed, tributes flooded social media. Messages from fellow crew members, classmates, and strangers moved by her story. They spoke of her laughter, her kindness, her passion for the sea. The hashtag Justice for Paige Bell began circulating, spreading from South Africa to Europe and the Caribbean. Yacht captains, maritime unions, and safety advocates began speaking publicly about what Paige's death revealed: a dangerous lack of oversight in hiring, inadequate background checks, and the vulnerabilities faced by young women working far from home. One veteran captain put it bluntly: "We sell the dream of paradise at sea, but we rarely talk about how easily it can turn into a nightmare." By mid-July, Paige's body was flown back to South Africa. The flight was long, quiet, accompanied by an escort from her family. She arrived home on July 12th, 2 days before what would have been her 21st birthday. At her memorial, the sea she loved so deeply was just beyond sight. Friends and family placed white lilies on the sand, their petals carried away by the wind. Someone read her favorite quote from a note she once wrote: No matter where I go, I want to leave a little light behind. And she had. The waves that carried far from it now carried her name. From Harbour Island to Durban, from marinas in Monaco to the docks of Fort Lauderdale, the story of Paige Bell spread like a tide that couldn't be stopped. A young woman had been found dead aboard a superyacht, and the world wanted to know why. By mid-July, her photograph, a radiant smile framed by sunlight, appeared everywhere, in newspapers, in yachting forums, on television screens. She was living her dream. One headline read, "She deserved better." Another simply said, "Paradise turned crime scene." But beneath the media glare, the reality was much quieter. A family navigating paperwork, grief, and the unbearable logistics of loss. Paige's parents were still in the Bahamas when her body was released for transport. They spent their days in a haze of interviews and meetings with authorities, their nights sleepless. "You think you understand pain," her mother told a reporter later, "until it walks into your life wearing your child's name." The repatriation was completed on July 12th. 2 days later, her 21st birthday, Durban's coastline filled with people carrying red velvet cake. Friends, strangers, fellow yacht workers, and ordinary citizens stood in the sand, candles flickering in the wind. One by one, they took photos of the slices beside the waves, posting them under the tag #SailHomePage. Across oceans, others joined in. Crew members on yachts in Europe and the Caribbean shared pictures too. Red cake on steel decks, plates held up to the horizon. It was a small gesture, but it turned into something enormous, a digital memorial stretching across continents. In interviews, Paige's family said they wanted her remembered not as a victim, but as a dreamer, a young woman who believed in adventure and kindness. Her sister Chelsea wrote, "She loved the sea because it made her feel free. I hope wherever she is now, she's still surrounded by waves." Meanwhile, in the Bahamas, Royal Bahamas, police continued their investigation. Officers confirmed that the case was being treated as homicide and that a single suspect, 39-year-old Mexican national Brigido Muñoz, had been charged. They released no details on motive, no statements about the nature of the attack. The lack of information frustrated the public, but investigators insisted the case was active and sensitive. Behind the scenes, the yachting industry was in turmoil. For years, life aboard luxury vessels had been sold as a dream. Travel, beauty, privilege. Few talk about what that dream demanded. Long hours, isolation, and vulnerability. Crew members lived where they worked, often under the authority of a single captain or manager, far from any formal oversight. When Paige's story broke, those quiet truths erupted into daylight. The Dockwalk and Superyacht news platforms published op-eds calling for reform. Veteran captains described how easy it was for someone with no background check to join a crew. "We do reference calls, not investigations," one said. "We trust the sea will sort out the rest." Others spoke of the lack of reporting channels for harassment or misconduct at sea. "If something happens on board," wrote one former stewardess, "you're trapped until landfall. You're told to stay quiet because image comes before truth." Paige's death became a symbol of everything that needed to change. Her name was mentioned in maritime safety meetings, international crew associations, and in petitions demanding mandatory background screening for yacht workers. One petition, titled Justice for Paige Bell, Safer Seas for All, gathered thousands of signatures within weeks. But no reform could bring her back. And for those who loved her, the campaign for justice felt endless. Her father spent weeks speaking with officials and media, pressing for updates. He wanted transparency, answers, anything that might make sense of the senseless. "We're not looking for revenge," he said. "We just want to know what happened to our daughter." The truth, however, moved slowly. Legal systems do at sea what ships do on calm water, drift. The Bahamian courts confirmed a preliminary hearing for November 20th, 2025, giving investigators more time to complete forensic analysis. Until then, Brigido Muñoz will remain behind bars at Fox Hill Prison, one of the Caribbean's most overcrowded facilities. To the Bell family, the delay was agony, but they took solace in the outpouring of support. Messages arrived daily, from crewmates, from strangers, from women who saw themselves in Paige's story. Many wrote about their own experiences of fear and silence aboard yachts. "I survived what she didn't," one message read. "I'll never stop speaking her name." For Paige's mother, those messages became lifelines. "It helps to know people care," she said. "It means her story isn't being buried with her." In Durban, her hometown rallied behind the family. A memorial fund was established to support safety initiatives for young women entering maritime careers. Schools organized awareness drives, teaching students about safe travel and workers' rights abroad. Her face became a symbol of courage and remembrance, a reminder that even one person's story can change how an entire industry sees itself. The pain, though, never softened. Her sister once described waking up every morning to the sound of the ocean outside their home and feeling like it was mocking her. "It used to be her favorite sound," she said. "Now it feels like it's whispering her name." Internationally, the coverage continued to grow. Media outlets revisited Paige's case whenever new details emerged. Each article revisited the same haunting questions. How could this happen on a vessel so small? Why didn't anyone hear her? And how did a young woman's dream job end in the engine room of a multimillion-dollar yacht? Answers remained sparse. The Royal Bahamas police maintained silence, citing ongoing proceedings. The captain and remaining crew, bound by legal and contractual restrictions, spoke little. The owners of Far From It issued a short statement expressing deep sorrow and full cooperation with authorities. Behind every statement, though, was a truth no one could deny. The world of yachting, built on the illusion of safety and privilege, had been shaken to its core. By October 2025, the turquoise calm of the Bahamas no longer looked like paradise. To the Bell family, it had become a place of unfinished goodbyes, a stretch of blue that held their daughter's last breath and the questions that haunted them still. The months since her death had passed like a storm's slow retreat. Quiet on the surface, but underneath, the wreckage remained. The case of the state versus Brigido Muñoz had moved into the Bahamian court system. Legal processes in island nations are deliberate, often slow, shaped by limited resources and jurisdictional complexity. For Paige's family, the wait was agony. Every passing week, another reminder that justice moves differently when oceans separate you from the truth. Paige's parents returned to Nassau in late October. They sat through procedural hearings, each lasting only minutes, where lawyers discussed evidence logistics, autopsy filings, and the suspect's custody status. No testimony, no closure, just administrative language and the quiet rustle of paper. Muñoz was brought in under police escort. Thin, pale, and expressionless, he avoided eye contact with everyone in the courtroom. The media were allowed only brief photographs before being escorted out. When asked for comment, he said nothing. The judge denied bail again, citing strong circumstantial and forensic evidence. No further details were given publicly, but that statement alone was enough to tell the world that the case was serious, that the evidence against him carried weight. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered along the steps. When Paige's mother emerged, she spoke softly but firmly. "We are here because she cannot be. We will not leave until justice is done." Her voice trembled only once, when she said her daughter's name. In South Africa, people followed the updates like chapters of a shared grief. Local news outlets replayed footage from the Bahamas, showing her parents' faces against the courthouse wall. Hashtags like #Justice for Paige Bell and #SafeSeas Initiative resurfaced across social media. For those in the yachting industry, the case had already changed things. Recruitment agencies tightened background verification. Several maritime organizations introduced emergency hotlines for crew safety. At safety conferences in Palma and Monaco, speakers referenced Paige by name. Her case is both a tragedy and a warning. But for her family, reform was only part of the story. What they needed was acknowledgement, a legal recognition of what had been done to their daughter. In early November, prosecutors confirmed that the Royal Bahamas Police had completed their forensic analysis. DNA samples had been matched, and witness statements corroborated a narrow timeline of events aboard Far From It. Authorities still withheld details from public release, but sources close to the investigation confirmed that the evidence supported the charge of murder. The preliminary hearing was set for November 20th, 2025. In the days leading up to it, the The Bells stayed in a small guest house near Nassau's waterfront. They kept to themselves, venturing out only for court briefings or quiet walks by the ocean. "We feel closer to her here," her father said. "It's painful, but it's where she last was." The night before the hearing, Paige's mother lit a candle on their balcony. She set beside it a small slice of red velvet cake, her daughter's favorite. "For her birthday," she whispered, "and for the day justice begins." The next morning, the courtroom was filled beyond capacity. Journalists, attorneys, maritime officials, and local residents curious about the case that had shaken their islands. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The charges were read aloud. Brigido Muñoz stood as the clerk recited. "On the 3rd day of July, 2025, at Harbour Island, you did unlawfully cause the death of one Paige Bell." He said nothing. His attorney entered a procedural response, requesting additional time to review evidence. The judge set the next date for February 2026, moving the case toward trial. It wasn't justice yet, but it was movement. Outside, Paige's family faced the cameras again. "We came here for truth," her mother said, tears in her eyes. "And truth takes time. But we will wait." That single sentence echoed across networks that evening. It became symbolic of something larger than one case, a parent's endurance against silence, a family's refusal to let bureaucracy bury their daughter's story. Back in South Africa, community vigils continued. The red velvet tradition endured. Each month, people shared photos tagged with her name. Cake by the sea, candles on decks, slices beside harbor lights. It became a quiet ritual of solidarity, a promise that she would not be forgotten. Even among strangers, her story carried weight. Maritime trainees in Cape Town began reciting her name during safety inductions. "Remember Paige," one instructor said, "because the sea remembers everything." Within the industry, Paige's death fueled uncomfortable discussions about gender and power. Former crew members spoke out about the hidden culture of silence aboard yachts, the unreported harassment, the fear of retaliation, the lack of accountability. Paige had never spoken publicly about any such issues, but her death forced those conversations into daylight. In August, Superyacht News published an editorial titled "The Paige Bell Effect." It read, "For decades we have romanticized a life at sea. Paige's death exposes what happens when we prioritize luxury over safety and silence over truth." By autumn, the effect was tangible. Major agencies began requiring psychological screening and harassment prevention training for all crew recruits. The International Seafarers Union created a scholarship in Paige's memory, funding safety education for young women entering maritime work. Her story was reshaping an entire culture, one conversation, one policy, one name at a time. Yet for her family, every step forward carried its shadow. "We're proud of what's changing," her father said, "but none of this brings her back. You wake up every day, and for a second you forget. Then you remember." At home, Paige's room remained untouched. Her seashell jars lined neatly on the windowsill, her photos of beaches pinned above her bed. Her sister often sat there in silence, scrolling through old videos of her laughing aboard deck. Hair whipped by wind, voice bright with joy. In one clip, Paige had said, "The sea is the closest thing to peace I've ever known." Now, that line felt heavier than ever. As November drew to a close, the Bells prepared to fly home again, leaving behind the island that had become both sacred and unbearable. Standing on the shore one last time, her mother whispered to the waves, "We'll be back when it's over. And then, maybe we can let you rest." The water rolled in and out, the same endless rhythm Paige had loved. But somewhere beneath that rhythm, the world had changed. The maritime industry was no longer free to look away. Her story had forced it to face the truth, that paradise isn't always safe, and that beneath every horizon lies responsibility. Justice was in motion now, slow but unstoppable like the tide itself. And for Paige Bell, for the dreamer who lived and died by the sea, it would not stop until her name meant more than tragedy. When the world lost Paige Bell, it lost far more than a name and a headline. It lost a young woman who had once made the sea feel safe, someone whose quiet optimism carried through every space she touched. Yet even in death, Paige became a force for change. Her story did not vanish beneath the waves. It traveled, reshaping the very world she once dreamed of exploring. In the months after her death, an industry built on luxury and silence began to stir. The same yachting world that had hidden behind glass and privilege could no longer ignore what had happened on that July morning. People call it the Paige Bell effect. The moment the illusion of paradise cracked and the truth spilled out, the reform started small. Agencies introduced background checks that had once been optional. Training schools began mandatory courses on safety and conduct. Captains were now required to document every incident at sea, however minor, and submit them to maritime authorities. Within a few months, Paige's name appeared in international safety papers and at conferences that once pretended crew welfare wasn't their concern. The words "never again" began to mean something real. The International Maritime Organization acknowledged her death in an official statement, calling it a reminder that human safety must extend to every corner of the ocean. The message was brief, but its timing spoke volumes. Her story had reached the highest levels of maritime law, turning one woman's tragedy into a global mirror. In Palma, Spain, a maritime safety summit dedicated its opening session to her memory. Her photograph, framed in white and blue, stood beside the lectern. Delegates from across the world listened as one captain. His voice breaking, said, "She believed in the sea more than most of us ever did. The least we could do now is make it safe for those who follow." Back in South Africa, her family carried the weight of both grief and purpose. Their home in Durban, once filled with laughter, had become quieter, gentler, and more determined. Paige's parents refused to let her story fade. They founded the Paige Bell Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting crew members working on private and chartered vessels. What began as a single idea at their kitchen table grew into a registered organization offering counseling, emergency aid, and safety workshops. Chelsea, Paige's sister, became its voice. She stepped into the role with trembling hands but unwavering heart, speaking at schools and maritime academies about her sister's courage. Paige loved her job, she said during one event, but she deserved to be safe. Every worker deserves that. Her speeches reached thousands, and each time she spoke her sister's name, the audience fell silent, not from pity, but from respect. As the legal case in the Bahamas progressed, the world kept watching. The November hearing brought journalists, advocates, and crew members to Nassau, all waiting for movement in a system known for its pace. When the accused appeared in court, the room fell silent. He gave no statement, and his trial was deferred. Yet even a delay couldn't undo what had already begun. The pressure was constant. The public wanted justice not just for Paige, but for every worker who had ever been made invisible at sea. Outside the courthouse, her parents stood surrounded by cameras. Her mother spoke quietly, her voice carrying the weight of the months behind her. "We will keep coming back until this is done, because she can't." The moment was brief, but defined everything they stood for, a family determined to turn heartbreak into movement. By early 2026, Paige's name was part of every maritime safety course. The Paige Protocol, a standardized checklist for yacht crew welfare, had been formally adopted by several international schools. It emphasized communication, accountability, and emergency access to shore-based authorities. Many called it her lasting gift to the sea she loved. Her legacy extended beyond policy. In Cape Town, a memorial plaque was installed overlooking the harbor, engraved with her name and the words, "Her light guides every voyage that follows." Every year on her birthday, July 14th, people gathered there with slices of red velvet cake, her favorite, and shared photos online under the tag #SailHomePage. It became a ritual of remembrance. The tradition spread far beyond South Africa. At marinas from Monaco to Miami, crews paused at dusk to honor her. Some set candles on deck rails. Others let petals drift into the water. They called it the candle and the cake. Simple, human, unspoken. One for her joy, one for her light. The world had begun to change because of her, but her family's pain never truly left. Her father once said that grief doesn't end. It only changes shape. Their purpose kept them moving. But every wave that crashed along the Durban coast reminded them of what they'd lost. Her mother often walked the pier at sunset and whispered into wind, We kept your promise, Paige. The sea is safer now. Through her story, the maritime community finally faced a truth it had ignored for too long. It acknowledged that paradise can turn dark when accountability disappears, that beauty without protection is a facade. Paige had not lived to see that truth realized, but because of her, it could no longer be hidden. In time, her story reached beyond ships and harbors. Universities began citing her case in courses about workplace safety and gender protection. NGOs studying isolation trauma at sea used her foundation's materials. Journalists revisited her timeline not to dwell on the horror, but to document what had grown in its aftermath: change, reform, and unity. Years will pass, and perhaps new names will fill the headlines, but Paige's will remain different. She will be remembered not as a victim, but as the reason others found safety. Her laughter, captured in old videos, still echoes across decks and cabins. Her kindness still moves between the tides. The ocean that once claimed her has become her legacy's messenger. It carries her memory across borders, into every harbor where someone steps aboard a vessel believing in their dream. The sea remembers her because she became part of it. Its lesson, its conscience, its light. Every reform, every policy, every safe return home is a quiet echo of her name. She may have died beneath paradise, but what rose in her place was something stronger, a world forced to see, to listen, and to change. Paige Bell's story ends not with tragedy, but with truth. Her courage outlived her. Her dream reshaped an industry. And her light, soft, steady, and unbreakable, still shines across every horizon she once hoped to chase.